Welcome to Amazon Legends, where we have real stories about making it big on Amazon. Our guests are CEOs of large companies and entrepreneurs who became power sellers, also providers specializing in helping sellers, aggregators that acquire sellers, and former Amazonians will give us an insight from behind the scenes. Here is your host, Nick Urison.
Welcome to another episode of Amazon Legends. My next guest today was a typical 9-to-5 employee, and then he moved into video production. And somewhere along the line, he discovered that there is a better life out there. And rather than usually most people come up with a solution for a problem where they say, there's got to be a better way to deal with this. And his way was dealing with life. And then he discovered that there is a better life by traveling around the world. So instead of going into something like related to tourism, and he became an Amazon seller. So this was, we are now recording in August of 2023, and it was 8 years ago. Since then, he's launched 3 private labels. And in the process, he developed a program for product launches that is called Playground Theory, which we are going to learn about today. And outside of work, other than traveling, he's into health and wellness in a deep sense that combines psychology and physical fitness. So with that, everybody, meet my guest, Vance Lee. Welcome to the show, Vance.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, I'm glad to have you. So we were talking earlier about body and mind coming together, and where does the heart fit into it? And sometimes we can do with it, sometimes we can do without it, right? It gives us a lot of pain. So, okay. So you have a unique approach for private label sellers. So tell us what that unique approach is.
Yeah. So imagine, what if you could sell your inventory before producing a single unit and then hit the ground running after you launch?
So obviously everybody would love that. So tell us more. How does that work?
So it's called a pre-order launch or pre-order launches.
Yeah. So as the name implies, so you are receiving forward orders before you do anything. But with Amazon, that's a little bit, not a little bit, but I mean, you can do future release date, but it cannot be months, so it won't really give you much. So what is that? What does this entail? Give us a little bit more.
So essentially, it won't be first on Amazon. So you'll launch outside of Amazon on a platform, for example, like Kickstarter, or another one called Indiegogo, which we can talk more about later. But the idea is here is you're launching first, and then you have strong momentum to continue combining this with a launch on Amazon right afterwards.
Okay. All right. So based on our discussion earlier, this is something that may be useful for a lot of private label sellers. And of course, everybody wants to minimize their inventory risk. More important, they want to start with a small amount of investment to test the market, but then they are stuck with the lead time, and they have no idea what kind of demand is going to be. So what we're going to do in this episode is walk through the timeline and the logistics and the intricate details of how to engineer this entire approach, which obviously you've been doing successfully for a long time. So you're going to share that with our listeners. And so with that, let's jump right in. So I'm planning to launch a pillow cover that is, whatever the unique aspect of it. So where do I start? Walk us through.
So the first thing to understand is that using a pre-order launch, so in the e-commerce world, we call this crowdfunding. So that's the umbrella category of what this is under. And the 2 platforms that are most popular are Kickstarter and Indiegogo, like I mentioned earlier. So these are the platforms that you're going to be using to launch. And so the first thing to clarify is that this is specifically a launch platform. So this doesn't replace Amazon. It doesn't replace Shopify. In fact, it's actually quite complementary, like we've hinted at earlier. So the idea is that you're going to be launching this product first on, let's say Kickstarter. So I'll just say Kickstarter from now on to keep it simple. And we're going to run this campaign. And once it's successful, we get funding from this, we get cash, and then we end up deciding we can launch on Kickstarter, or excuse me, on Amazon or on Shopify, any platform of our choice. So this is the approach that we're talking about today, is really just kind of like a precursor to a launch, essentially a pre-launch. And so the idea here is that we're trying to do a few things here. First, like you mentioned, one of the goals of this pre-launch is to understand the market demand for this product category. And also, like you hinted, the idea is if we are able to be successful with this, what we're going to do is we're going to be able to mitigate inventory risk. So the way that this platform works is that you're essentially not selling the product outright to customers. So customers go onto these platforms and they understand that they're going to be pre-ordering the product. So they're going to pay for a product that doesn't exist yet. And when it gets manufactured eventually, maybe a month or a couple months later, then that's when they get shipped the product. And their reward, so to speak, for supporting and participating in one of these projects is to be able to get the product first. So just to understand how that works, then we can kind of go into the details of what executing this could actually look like.
So the value proposition for anybody who is going to pay you a dime, because people will pay you understanding that they're going to get nothing for it for a while. And the benefit to them is they'll be the first to receive it, right?
Yes. So, I mean, these platforms actually started originally as a way to support really cool and unique ideas. So a lot of these interesting products that that are now kind of, some of them are still around, some of them not so much. For example, Oculus Rift was a product that was on Kickstarter, the 3D goggles. And so this was a kind of interesting idea at the beginning, and they wanted, they didn't have enough funding to bring this to market. So the original context of these websites was to get support from customers in advance to actually fund the production run, so to bring the idea to life. So that's how these platforms were originally established. But now, years later, it's no longer for that anymore. A lot of people are just bringing different products to life. They don't have to be super innovative. They don't actually have to even need the money. It's in a way where people before actually needed the funds to launch a product. And now it's just being used as a unique launch strategy to be able to help people mitigate inventory risk. So to be on the platform, all you need is a working prototype and a campaign page. So this is equivalent to your product listing page on Amazon. And when you have this, you're able to launch on this platform. So you don't actually need inventory ready. And so to answer your question, the people that are excited about this, they understand that they're supporting a project and they come shopping with that intent. So this is not the same type of intent as going to Amazon and searching for pillow covers. People are kind of here and they're looking at categories they're interested in, maybe a house, home decor, that type of thing. And then they come across, this really interesting pillow cover that they, in our example, that they're interested in. And that's how they make this decision to want to purchase. And so the platform is full of people that are kind of early adopters, and because that's originally how this platform was established, for people that were excited to support new projects, new brands, new business entrepreneurs, and this is how kind of it evolved from there.
Yeah. So is it fair to say that this is for some, I should say, it's more successful for some categories, but not all, or does it apply to anything? You can do this with anything.
That's a really good question. And I've seen weird and successful products in so many different categories, all the way, from standard categories like apparel, home and decor, those categories, pets, like you see a lot of products in those categories. But I've seen products be successful in categories like, sex toys, and, I've seen category of even food. Chili hot sauce. This is actually a really cool story because there was a chef that came to us and said, hey, I want to launch this product. She has no e-commerce background, and she was interested in launching a product, which is her recipe for a chili sauce. And so we said, hey, why don't you consider looking at Kickstarter? Because this could be a way for you to start building some momentum and building a community and an audience that really supports you. So she ended up launching on Kickstarter, and she actually did very well. She raised $120,000 in this Kickstarter launch campaign. So this is before she had to produce this hot sauce. So it's really interesting because as a result of this campaign, she got a lot of publicity and a lot of press covering kind of like this hot sauce. And eventually she took this and she commercialized this on e-commerce. So she first brought this to Amazon. She had these 3 SKUs that were doing really well. And I mean, if you know anything, if you've ever bought hot sauce before, it's usually like this really kind of cheap item at the bottom of the grocery store shelf for a couple of dollars, right? She was selling this hot sauce for $15 to $17 on Amazon. And she was doing about $200,000 a month at that point. And it was a crazy successful campaign. Well, the campaign that led to this e-commerce results. And it wasn't only Amazon where she limited this to. She ended up, because she had an audience and she built a lot of excitement on Instagram, she was able to launch her own Shopify store selling the hot sauces as well. And this Shopify store was getting, at the time, the last time I checked, they were at 100,000 visitors every single month. So this is like a hot sauce. This isn't like a clothing brand. This isn't like a unique like product category, like an invention or like a technology piece. It's hot sauce. And so she ended up doing really well because the foundation that she built on this launch was about the community that she built and an audience that was really excited. And then she did one more thing that was really interesting, which was she used these results. So she essentially had this pre-order launch that was very successful. She took this result and she kind of presented this to investors, so strategic private investors. And essentially what she said was, hey, I didn't launch this product and this already raised $120,000. And so essentially she used this as a way to get funding from investors. And she had strategic investors that helped her with retail. And they brought this into Walmart, Costco, and then the most difficult one to get into is Whole Foods. She got into all these stores and all of these different ways to kind of diversify her brand. And all of this really just came from the initial launch of this Kickstarter campaign. So to answer your question, lots of categories to be successful, even categories that aren't really like traditionally you think about as like successful e-commerce type of product categories.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So you could be in any category. So the first thing you have to do, I guess, if somebody says, okay, what do I do if I want to sell on Amazon, my private label? I say you need to create a brand registry account, and then you need to create a Seller Central account. So let's start with those logistics here. So you go to Kickstarter or Indiegogo, you mentioned. So walk us through the logistics of starting.
Sure. So really good question. And I think in terms of starting, and if you're considering a launch, you would actually start in a very similar way to Amazon in terms of you're doing research. So we do research in a slightly different way where we don't necessarily just limit our research on Amazon. We will incorporate Amazon data, but we'll search for, let's say our product category is, like a pet product. We won't just search pet products on Amazon, but we'll search out successful brands that are selling pet products. We might search similar product categories of these pet products that are on maybe Kickstarter. And so our first step is always actually to do a little bit of research, similar to the way you do product research on Amazon. So the idea is to start validating at a high level, is there some type of demand in this niche? And to understand, is what I'm thinking of launching going to be interesting to be able to hook the customers to be interested in purchasing the product. So that's the way we'd start. We'd start with a little bit of product research to kind of have an introductory kind of validation into thinking, should we move forward with this?
And is that research taking place on Kickstarter or Amazon or both?
Kickstarter, Amazon, and we generally like to look at successful brands in the niche as well. So if you're selling a pet product, you would look at let's say it's a pet electronic product or something like this. I would recommend that you look for maybe 4 or 5 different brands that are in the market. Often they're actually off Amazon. They're not really selling on Amazon to see how they're doing. And the idea is to look at these ideas and see if there's room. If these guys are doing very well and they have a lot of traffic to their website, then it's an indicator that there's an opportunity here because this product category is doing well, or this specific product niche within this product category is doing well.
Okay. And in your research, because when we do research on Amazon, we're looking at keywords by volume and sales and competition and things like that. So Share with us some practical tips for doing that research.
Sure. So the volume stuff coming from Amazon is extremely valuable. So the keyword search volume, things like what is the estimated sales per month, like those types of things will give you an idea of what's performing on Amazon. And so if you understand how to do that for Amazon, this is going to be very helpful for this process. The other things that we try to look for in this process is we try to look for specifically how this product might stand out. So essentially we're looking for angles of potential USPs, and we look for we might go through a process of doing research on potential competitor reviews on third-party websites, on their own website, on Amazon, and we start looking for whether or not there's an opportunity to distinguish this product in a way that's going to have it stand out, in a way that's going to be unique and something that's going to hook the audience within this niche. So in a way, we're doing product research, reviews, kind of this like sentiment analysis. But really, the idea is we're looking for how can we make this product stand out and how can this hook if we're going to be selling this on Kickstarter. So we have a bunch of frameworks that we use to go through this process, but one of them is essentially identifying areas to position the product so that it can either be positioned uniquely to the same audience. So if you find a different way to talk about the product or the benefits in a way that that audience hasn't seen it before, that's going to be a really strong way to have it be distinguished, or maybe even to present the product to a different audience. So one of my favorite examples of this is there's a product that I saw called After Socks. And so these are kind of the socks that have this like this a little slightly harder bottom sole, so you don't have to wear the shoes. So you're actually using them for hiking, and it feels like you're walking on your feet and you're protecting your feet so that you can walk around with them. So this is actually quite a popular product that exists, and it's kind of capturing the movement of people that want to walk and feel this like free movement on their feet. So anyways, there is a Kickstarter campaign that took this product concept and almost launched the exact same product, but they launched it in towards a different niche. So they actually positioned this towards women, and they called this After Socks. And the idea was that this product is going to be something that you carry in your purse for when you go out and you party, or you're wearing high heels, so that you can take off your heels and then you can put on these socks, and so you don't have to walk around with the heels afterwards after the night out. So they essentially took a product that existed and positioned it to a different audience that clearly needed it. So there's many different ways to change the way that you position a product and have it to stand out. That's one of them, is just to simply point it to a different audience and find a different way to sell it to that audience. And recently, another good example of this is I saw a campaign that raised about $90,000 for their launch, and they called this natural towels or something like this. But the idea was these are just extra large towels, and they sold it as body positive towels for people that are bigger. And for me, I'm looking at this, is like, this is just a really big towel, and you just raised $90,000 with positioning this in a way that's just acceptable to a certain audience that's going to be interested in purchasing it. And I think that's genius. It's a really, really intelligent thing to do. And so essentially what we're looking here for is an opportunity to position the product in a different way. So this is what the product research for. There's a few things that I haven't mentioned yet. For example, we might be able to change the materials slightly. So adding interesting, cool materials, changing the aesthetic design a little bit. But all these are things that we learn from the research process to be able to identify how can we actually create a product that's going to stand out a little bit more. And Amazon sellers are doing this to some capacity currently. And the goal is to see how we can actually do this and create a really interesting product that's defensible. And it's even if it's not necessarily 100% unique, to find some subset of an audience or market that you can sell this to that gets them excited.
So what I'm hearing is, really, at the end of the day, this is about doing research in general, not necessarily keyword, etc. But what you're looking for is something that you find, if you like, a vacuum for, where there is a need and there is an audience, not necessarily a unique product, so to speak, but could be an existing product, existing space, but a unique audience, and create a version of whatever already exists, or really it's another word, creating a different version of it, maybe different ingredient or different material, different, whatever context, or even just the positioning of it in terms of who it is for. So that's what I'm hearing, not necessarily so much getting into numbers like you would do with Amazon, right?
Yeah, so I mean, the numbers portion of it will be similar to what we do on Amazon, just to understand, okay, well, if we want to actually move this to Amazon afterwards, we need to make sure that the demand is going to be there. So if the intention is to move to Amazon, then that's going to be an important part of it. But what we're trying to do here is we're trying to identify how we can actually create a product that's going to be that's going to stand out. And so if you can stand out off Amazon, then by the time you get to Amazon, you're going to do really well, because a lot of sellers are often kind of lazy. They're just doing the bare minimum private labeling, and it's not like they're investing a lot of effort into trying to figure out how they can actually create a product that's going to be fairly distinct, that's defensible, that can be sustainable. And so this process will allow you to consider the fact that you can launch on Amazon afterwards. But beforehand, you're actually going to be able to really think about how to have a hypothesis on how your product is going to stand out. And then later on, we can jump into this later, but the goal is actually to start building an audience around this and getting real customer feedback to validate this idea. So right now we're at the early phases, which is kind of to form our hypothesis. And the next step will be to essentially get feedback from actual customers in that target audience to start validating our idea way even before we launch. So we don't have to launch to find out that people want it or don't want it. We actually highly recommend, at least the way that we approach it, is that you want to get that validation well before, because at some point you can actually learn that this is not exactly what people want. And that's really good feedback, because you don't have to waste time, you don't have to waste money. It's a good opportunity to get that feedback well in advance.
To all my listeners, how would you like to boost your Amazon sales by up to 600%? That means you must have a winning product detail page. Mindful Goods crafts product pages that pop. Their creative marketers ensure your products aren't just another face in the crowd, but they stand out and sell. From SEO optimized copy to scroll stopping visuals, they've got your back. And for a limited time, my listeners get $100 off a brand story service. Elevate your Amazon game with Mindful Goods. Visit www.mindfulgoods.co/legends now and enter the code Amazon Legends to receive your $100 off. I mean, you've given very good examples, and what I heard that was in common with all those examples was people already had a product. They had an idea. They said, this is what I want to sell. And then they went out and then they did the research to validate in their research their thoughts first. Not, oh, okay, let's launch a product. Let's see what it is. Let's see where there's, that's not the case, because most people have a product idea. They have something that they're thinking of. They just don't know what kind of demand will exist for it. So you can start with something you have in mind, but you want to validate your ideas with your research first and identify the opportunity. And then with that opportunity, now fall back on Amazon to research the numbers associated. If that idea becomes successful, what is the potential? Because you may actually find an audience for it, but the numbers may not support it yet as a real significant business to build. So, okay, I understand the roadmap. So, okay, and really what you are getting in this process is people putting their money where their mouth is, because you can ask somebody, well, what do you think about this? It's, oh, I think it's great. Okay, will you write me a check for it? Nah, not really. So it doesn't quite count as feedback. So that's the nature of it. So here they'll actually write you a check, and then you'll create what you call that audience, that following, before you do anything with Amazon. So, okay, so we've done the research, we validated, we know exactly what we're gonna do, and now the next thing is what?
Yeah, so the next thing is actually to, and I'm simplifying this a little bit, but the next thing is to actually start validating. So now that you've validated it with looking at your research in the market, the next step is to start building an audience, and we call this a community, because what we're looking to do is we want to get validation now from real people that are interested in the products before launch. So the idea here is we can start getting in touch with people that are passionate about, let's say, dogs, and we say, hey, this is our idea, this is what it's going to do. And a lot of people actually come to this in different spectrums of, they either have an idea at the early stage, or some people already come and they've established the product already, like they have a product prototype. So people come and they're curious about this process at different stages. But regardless of where you're at, you can actually still get feedback from customers that is going to be very useful for you. So if you're in the very early stages where it's a product idea, getting in touch with potential target audience customers are going to allow you to find out, well, is this product a good idea? Does it, are they thinking what I'm thinking? If there's 5 different.
Hold on, you're skipping several steps, which kind of give me, we need to clarify. I'm sitting here at home. I've got an idea. And I went out, I did my research very thoroughly, and I know exactly what it is, what unique approach I have. Okay, so how am I approaching these people? Who are these people? How am I getting their information? You understand? What are the steps in between before I ask a single question to a single person?
Great question. So this is going to be dependent on your niche. And so the question that I usually ask in the situation is, where does your audience, or where does your target audience hang out? So if you are, for example, a dog lover, you might find that there's, Facebook groups for dog lovers, or Reddit communities for dog lovers, or a local dog meetup where there's, hundreds of people walking their dogs on a weekend. Or like, the idea is, the point is you start looking for where people hang out that is your target audience. And generally the online ways are easier because there's like hundreds of groups that have like tens of thousands of members that love dogs. So in this situation, you would start looking for places where people hang out, and you would start engaging in those communities. So it might be as simple as putting a post up on that community and saying, hey, I want to talk to people that have an interest in this, a automatic dog feeder or something like this, or a dog toy that does this. And so you start having these interactions, and you don't need a lot of these interactions. You might just need 5 or 10 or 30 interactions before you get the sense that it's like, hey, people really like this. This is a great idea. Or you might just go to one Saturday to the local dog meetup and you have a conversation with a bunch of the owners there, and they're like, hey, I think this is not a very good idea, but this is what I want. And if you hear that once or twice, then this can start shaping the hypothesis that you had to be in a different direction, to be actually helpful feedback. Because often what we do, at least in the Amazon world, is, we just look at the data, and that's what we use to launch. But often if we're thinking of creating something new, we might ask for friends, we might ask other sellers, we don't ask other sellers because that's we don't want our idea out there. But we might use things like PickFu or something like this. But the problem with that is that if you're asking your friends and family, they're probably not in your target audience, so they're not giving you feedback that's the most helpful. If you're asking PickFu and these types of like, what do you like, this versus this, we don't know who those people are. We have no idea if they're in a certain target age range, if they're actually in your target audience in terms of dog lovers. Maybe they're just, we don't know anything about them. So in that range, it's actually a lot less helpful than to be able to find directly people that are going to be with your target audience. So that's why I like to ask where they hang out. And then the second benefit of doing this, which is a kind of like a compound benefit of 2 things at the same time, is not only are you getting feedback from these customers, you're starting to slowly build an audience of people that are interested in your products. So at the same time of getting feedback, you're developing this relationship with these people. So the more that you do this, the more customers now that you have interested in your product. So this is a way of building up an audience that's going to be ready to purchase your product when it comes time to launch. So this is the reason that we go through this process, number 1, for feedback, and number 2, to build an audience and to build a community as we're going through this process. So it's no work is wasted. It's a benefit that's going to help us in multiple ways.
So you're collecting email addresses from these people that you are interacting ideally, right? So if you're going to have that communication going forward, that's what's needed, right?
Exactly, yeah. So we start with email addresses, but then we can turn email addresses. Once we have their email address, we can invite them to a Facebook group. There's different ways that we can interact with them going forward. It also depends on your demographic and where they hang out. So what you choose to communicate with your audience with depends on those factors. But the idea here is you get in communication with them, and this becomes your launch list. So if you have 600 people on a list, and 30% of them are interested, you already have 200 people that are ready to purchase your product on launch. And if it's $100 price point, that's already a really significant launch. So
okay, so what is a good number to shoot for before you do anything? So you've done your interaction, you offline, online, and then you've got a number of people on your list that that they were favorable for your idea. What is the number you're looking for before you move on to the next step?
Sure. So that depends on your funding goal. So if you want to raise $10,000, that's going to be different than if your goal is $100,000. And so I don't. We didn't mention this earlier, but for the Kickstarter campaigns, it's a limited time campaign. So it's up to 60 days. You can choose 0 days, 1 day to 60 days, and that as soon as that campaign is over, it's over. But one thing that you have to select at the beginning is you have to select what your funding goal is. So you have to say, this is how much money I want to raise as a part of this campaign. And if you hit this goal, then Kickstarter gives you the funds at the end of the campaign. So within 15 days, you get paid from Kickstarter. If you don't hit your goal, then you don't get any of it. So we generally recommend that the funding goal is very set fairly low, anywhere between $10,000 to $20,000 to $30,000, depending on what's actually needed for your launch. But the idea here is we want to hit this funding goal within the first 24 to 48 hours. And once you hit this, the trick is that there's an algorithm just like Amazon where you start to get organic ranking within the Kickstarter platform. So that's why it's so important to build up this audience. And so to answer your question, how big should this audience be? That depends on a few things. It depends on how big your funding goal is. So the larger the funding goal, the more people you want on your list in advance. And then the other thing is how active your list and how engaged your list is. So if you're sending emails to them and everybody's opening the emails and you have an 80% open rate, and people are responding to your questions, or you're sending out a survey and then everybody's filling it out, then you're going to have a way more engaged list than somebody who is having a 5% open rate. So it's not about the quantity of emails, but it's about the level of engagement and participation that these people are engaging with prior to the campaign. So we use this as an indicator for how healthy our audience is before we choose to launch. So we know that we're generally going to be successful when we launch. We have 100% success rate when it comes to launching. And the reason for this is that we don't launch until we know that we have enough of an audience and enough of the support to move to the stage of let's get ready for launch. So that's a slightly longer answer to your short question.
I want to introduce Cellcore to all my listeners. As you all know, it's essential to add another selling channel to Amazon. Even though Walmart is the natural addition, you need the know-how to hit the ground running. Cellcore is a Walmart-approved agency for launching and scaling Amazon brands on Walmart, and even getting you into Walmart stores. They manage over 400 brands and 100,000 products. They were kind enough to offer my listeners a free comprehensive audit and a $500 statement credit. Visit www.cellcore.co/legends and mention Amazon Legends to activate this offer. But do it quickly because this offer may not last long. www.cellcore.co/legends. So based on everything we discussed so far, if I divide this into phases, phase one is research. You don't do a thing, there's no logistics involved. It's just simply doing your research outside Amazon to find an opportunity for a need, for something. It could be anything, audience, material, whatever. Once
you can start with Amazon also. And you can also start on Amazon if that's where you're doing research.
Yeah, and then you back that up with data. And so wherever you find that opportunity, back that up with data. And so we call that phase one. If we were to call that phase one, that's all you doing it. And then the next thing is to really, so phase two would be to build that audience, but what takes to build an audience that will ultimately write you checks is going to depend on how used to they are in interacting with you in numbers that are meaningful for your next phase. So go out and meet people, build your mailing list, but also engage them through interactions so that you know that when you finally reach out to them and say, can you do this for me? I'm now going all the way. Number one, they're gonna open it up and read it. Number two, that they're gonna take action on it. So what you are doing in the process of your interaction is building your metrics, so to speak. What is the open rate? What is the response rate? You know, one of the favorite things that I have is a friend of mine, a close friend of mine, has on his, there's no group, no nothing. He's just my contact on Facebook. He posts a question like once a week. What is your favorite movie of all time? What is your favorite travel destination of all time? What is your, and then one day I said to him, listen, I see these questions, and then of course I answer. And why do you keep asking these things? What do you get out of it? He says, it's called engagement. I'm trying to keep my connections active at all times. So I know how many people are responding to any question I put, how many people are seeing it and things like that. So keep the engagement. So in phase two, keep the engagement high without really asking them to do anything for you, but just asking questions or whatever the case may be. So now that you have, and by the way, you're doing all this based on how much you want to raise. So some of those engagement rates, open rates and everything else, a part of it will translate into how many people will actually write you checks, and based on the amount that you want to raise. So, okay, so we've done all that, and we set the goal. We're going to raise $25,000, and we have a pretty good idea about how many people we have on the list and what our engagement rate is. So let's move on to the next phase.
Sure. So presumably we're going to be at the same time refining the product. I mean, assuming the product is good to go, because in many situations, actually, people come to me and their product is already ready. So in this particular situation, when they get feedback from their customers, it's not necessarily about refining the product because they've already decided what the product is going to be. This is more about understanding how to, what we talked about earlier, position the product. So let's say we have 4 or 5, 6 different benefits of this product or features, and I think I think this is going to be most marketable. But when we start asking our audience, they might tell us something different. So what we're doing is we're using the feedback to also improve the way that we market and sell the product, to present it to the customers in a way that makes them want to buy it. So this is where we're kind of doing very, very valuable market research to get the customers to tell us what they need for us to present this to them in a way that they're going to want to buy it. So this is going to be very helpful to point out, because this is also relevant in terms of product feedback, but this is more product positioning feedback. And so once we have a lot of this data, then it's about preparing the campaign page. So this is equivalent to your product, your Amazon product listing page, to be able to start setting this up. So this is going to require, of course, assets. So, photo, copy, and the main kind of feature at the top of the video. So the interesting and the positive thing about this is these are assets that you would have needed to launch on Amazon. So you would have needed photos, you would have needed copy. I mean, some people are debating about video nowadays, but I think investing in high quality video is really, really valuable for many reasons to have on Amazon. So I think these are really, really key assets. So the only caveat is some people on Amazon, they're going to cheap out and get their friends, cousins, girlfriends to take photos because they're a photographer. Here, you really just want to, if you've reached this point, you have customers interested, you're building this audience, you really just want to invest in the assets, because this is not just for the campaign, this is not just for Kickstarter, this is going to be used on Amazon as well. This is going to be used on your ads. If you have an email list and you're launching a Shopify store, this is going to be used in your emails and your Facebook ads, whatever it is. You're investing in the future of this product and this brand. So this is a good opportunity to invest in those assets. So the idea is you're going to put together this campaign page, which is a story that tells your customer, your audience, why they should be supporting you, why they would be interested in supporting you, what they're going to get with the product. And so this is essentially an extended product listing page that's going to get people excited to purchase your product. So you're gonna create this, and you're gonna develop this in advance, just like you would develop for an Amazon launch. So this is not extra work. This is just work at a different stage. With my recommendation of a higher quality type of investment in the assets.
Yeah. So you're building your content, and are you factoring in any of the things that you would do with Amazon, like keywords or anything like that? Or are you simply telling your story and presenting the pictures and the video about the product?
You don't really necessarily factor in keywords at this stage. For the most part, you're just doing your best to make this marketable when people see this page. So later on, you can optimize for SEO, because there's a good point here, which is this page. Once you're successful, it stays on Google forever. Like, it stays on Kickstarter, but also indexes very well on Google. So my campaigns that are successful, if you search my product name or my brand name, these products are always in the top 3 of Google. So any successful campaign that I've launched, or any of our clients or members in our program have launched, they index very, very well on Google. So anytime anybody searches your product or your brand name, we're going to find your product. So this is an awesome opportunity to kind of index for SEO. But that's a different topic. But what you're asking is, in terms of preparing for the page, do you need to prepare like any type of focus on SEO or keywords? At this stage, not really. You're just trying to make this marketable and meaningful for the person that's going to look at it.
You just tell your story and put the pictures and the videos together with the words so that people get the idea. Okay. So one thing I want to cover, because I don't know this, I've never done it. So I need to know, for anybody who's never done it, with Amazon, you have, like I said, you have a brand registry, and you have a Seller Central account, and also you have a professional selling plan, and you have individual plan. So there's all these different options. So tell us, with Kickstarter, is there such a thing? And what about the trademark issues and things like that?
Yeah, great question. There's nothing like this on Kickstarter. Really, the way to get a listing approved is you just submit a draft of your campaign page, which is your product listing page, and they look at it. If they look at the product and it seems like you've shown that the product exists, they're generally going to approve it, unless it's in a category of restricted products, which is things like like drugs or weapons and things like this. But for the most part, if they believe that your product exists, which is why earlier we said you need a working prototype, that's how they approve your campaign page. So if they don't see anything glaringly wrong with it, they just approve it like that. So there's no brand registry, there's no equivalent of that. It's more of they want to know that your product is something that exists, so that their audience is not going to get screwed from buying something that is like a phantom product or an imaginary product.
Yeah. So you need a working prototype.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So somewhere in between research and getting your campaign, you also need to build a working prototype. So that's an important piece of detail. But obviously, not talking quantity, we're just working prototype. Okay.
Yeah, you just need one, and so you just need the prototype, and you need the campaign page, and those are your requirements for being able to get approved by Kickstarter to launch.
Now the campaign page is up. So what are you doing next?
So, well, before the campaign, so all of these activities leading up to the day it goes live on Kickstarter, I would categorize under pre-launch activities. So your pre-launch activities probably account for like 80% of your work, 80, right. 90%, because you're preparing in advance. There's things that you can do during the campaign, but that's not as significant as making sure that you're prepared before your launch. So when we talk about, okay, well, what are we doing during the launch? A lot of that stuff has actually happened prior to the launch. So we built up our audience. We've been engaging with them, maybe sending them surveys, maybe sending them product updates of like, hey, here's how it's going so far. Here's our newest prototype, this type of thing. We do something called a launch countdown sequence. So there's two strategies, but the main one that we focus on in terms of preparation for the launch is we call this launch countdown sequence. So 7 or 10 days before the launch, we're going to start really focusing on announcing the launch date and time. So the idea is we want to get this into the minds of the customers that to be ready to purchase that date. And there's a bunch of embedded strategies into this. For example, having a certain number of early birds or super early birds where they get a better price. So it encourages them to buy on the first day when they see it. There's a lot of other things we can do kind of in this realm, but the idea is how can we get as many people in our audience to buy on day one within the first 24 to 48 hours as possible. And if we can encourage a lot of those people, we hit our goal very quickly. This is going to start to get attention for the Kickstarter algorithm, and we're going to start being able to get some organic lift within the actual platform as well.
Okay, so you really need to plan your action, so to speak, build that sequence. What's the value proposition for asking them to do whatever you're asking them to do, and then. And that will, it's just like Amazon. When you launch something, you have the honeymoon period where you're supposed to perform the best, and then that will get you better exposure and ultimately get you ranked. So this is the same kind of situation where right after launch, within the first 24 to 48 hours, you have the most people writing you checks, bottom line. But you have to work up to it with your pre-launch sequence. Okay.
Yeah, so pre-launch engagement, pre-launch preparation, this is all kind of building up towards that launch day to get them excited. So that's what you're really doing, and that's actually not like you're not doing this at launch. You're doing this before, and to make sure that the momentum is going to be there during launch.
Yeah. So this is called setting yourself up for success right from the get-go, right? So that's what you are doing. Now there is something you said earlier which is important. So you set your funding goal, and the timeline is limited to 60 days. It can't go beyond 60 days. And we're talking about Kickstarter. And if you meet your goal or exceed your goal, at the end of those 60 days, they will release the funds to you. If not, you fall short. Then what happens? Tell us about that.
Well, everybody just gets refunded. This is like if you wanted to raise 50 and you raise 45, everybody gets a refund essentially. The project is not considered to be successful because you didn't hit your goal, and that's what Kickstarter thinks that you needed to be able to deliver this project successfully, because that's what you set your goal to be. So if you can't deliver, well, I mean, if you're missing money to deliver, let's say you wanted to raise $500,000 and you only raised $100,000, they wouldn't give you that money because they would assume that you can't actually deliver because your goal was needed to be $500,000. So that's kind of the way of trying to protect the customers, assuming that the person that's selling has made the right estimates for what they need to be able to launch the product.
Yeah, so it's why it's important to make sure that you are setting a goal that's, so to speak, a realistic goal. So yes. I should say smart goal, right? Or SMA. Yeah. So are there fees involved in this? So if you raise $50,000 exactly, you get the exact 50,000, or do they have fees?
Yeah, so there's Kickstarter has a 5% fee, and there's a 3% payment processing fee that's from the payment processor. So 8% fee total with Kickstarter, which, I mean, for most people, that's really not that much. I mean, even the Amazon fee for most people is like double or triple that. So this is really not going to be where you're hit with whether or not the campaign is successful financially. Most people have no issues with being financially successful with the campaigns.
Yeah, I mean, of course, when you have no money to start with, and then you're raising this, the fees will come out. But it's something to factor into the calculations, because 8% is not a big amount, but it's also not very small amount either. So it's something to factor into the calculations. Okay, so you've done your pre-launch sequence, and now the campaign went live. And so on that first day, what is the announcement like? It's just you making the announcement and saying that the campaign is live, or walk us through how that happens and immediately after launch?
Yeah, so I'll use an example from my most recent launch, which was these coffee glasses. So my first product on Kickstarter did about 650,000 on my first launch. So that was my kind of like introduction to Kickstarter, and that was a coffee maker, the cold brew coffee maker. And so my second product was actually an idea from our audience. It was they wanted to see a cup and a glass. And so we ended up using the feedback from, so this is another cool thing, is that you can, once you develop a relationship with the audience, they can start giving you ideas for product. So this product was a coffee glass. We called it a Vance Lee. And the idea was that it enhances the way that coffee smells and tastes, just like wine glasses. We prepared for this launch, and we got a lot of feedback from interactions from customers well in advance. And leading up to the campaign, we kept teasing the product. So it's like, hey, here's the feature number 1, feature number 2, feature number 3. So counting down all the way to the launch date. And so all of these emails contain the exact launch time and date. So we're going to be telling them, hey, on August 1st, we're going to be launching this product at 7 a.m. Eastern time or something like this. And people are ready for this time. So we're going to be sending reminder emails all the way up until this point, including the launch email that goes live on that day. And so this is what allows you to get that momentum. We already had an audience that was excited about coffee. And so we had a $20,000 funding goal. We hit that within pretty much the first hour. This is the momentum that's driven to kind of by your messaging and your emails to get your audience excited.
Cool. So people know exactly what's going to happen and when it's going to happen. And then when it does happen, then finally they go and
they can purchase, yeah. So during this time, the idea is we're building excitement and people getting excited and ready for it. We're teasing features, we're teasing different elements about the product that could be interesting. And so it's just kind of this like this process where we build excitement around the launch. And so by the time we reach the launch, people are ready to pull out their wallets and put down the order.
Cool. So in your experience, let's say that you're going to raise $20,000 or 25,000, we said at the beginning. So we raised the 25,000. That automatically translates into quantity, right? So people are buying this item. So it means so many pieces are already pre-ordered and paid for, and that's the indication of the demand. So as far as translating that to Amazon, in your experience, does that replicate on 1-to-1 or double, triple? What, I mean, this is very hard to answer, but is it ever possible that, Kickstarter, because the spirit of the people is support, right? Obviously, commercial interest is one thing, but the spirit is also important, the motivation. So does it replicate? What is your experience with that?
Yeah, so this is where the Amazon research data is helpful to understand what potential that you can expect within the Amazon platform. And it obviously depends on product category. There's so many variables, but if we're looking at Amazon performance data, that's going to give us the best indicator of what that will look like when it comes to moving over to Amazon. And the benefit of a few things. Well, if we're working on developing a unique product, this is going to stand out on Amazon, and it's going to be helpful. We get a whole bunch of other benefits, like, well, we immediately get access to these customers. So it's not like Amazon where you can't communicate with them by email. Another massive benefit of doing it this way is you automatically get the emails of everyone who's purchased your product. So you can actually communicate with them. So you can say, hey, I'm going to launch on Amazon now. Thanks for supporting. I'm going to give you a, promo code or something like this to share this with your friends and family who also like dogs, and to take advantage of it during this time frame. So you can actually immediately have access to an audience that cares about your niche, might be buying the product again for themselves or for a friend, and engage immediately to help you launch on Amazon. So there's a lot of benefits to kind of like this. Essentially, there's a lot of benefits to having access to your own audience, and this is something that Amazon obviously makes very difficult because of obvious reasons. But once you start playing this game, it becomes a very, very different game because now you have an audience that cares about what you do. So with our product, for example, we had about 10,000 customers before the launch from our first campaign. We had $1 million campaign across Kickstarter, Indiegogo, and pre-orders, upsells. And so in our second campaign, when we launched the coffee product, we essentially obviously reached out to this audience that was already excited about coffee. So when we launched, we had our funding goal within the first hour. And the coolest thing was at the end of the campaign, we raised about $319,000. And we looked at the stats, and about 5% of our customers from the initial campaign came back to support the second campaign. So 5%, that doesn't sound like a very, very big number, but when we looked at the actual revenue that was generated by those customers, it was about $39,000 of sales from initial customers. So imagine being able to launch your product to your own audience without PPC spending, without giveaways or these other tactics to try to arbitrarily get momentum. You actually have people that are ready to support your product when you launch. So when you launch product 2, product 3, accessory 1, accessory 2, product 4, there's people that are in this niche that care about what you're doing. So one of the biggest benefits of this approach is that you're building a relationship with a customer that really cares about what you're doing. And this can really help you scale your e-commerce results. Being able to launch every single time and get $20,000 to $40,000 of sales from your own audience is a massive advantage for sellers. And we don't have to go about these weird roundabout ways to try to get momentum on the platforms if we had this option, right?
Well, I mean, we talk about it over and over. We're trying to get influencers. We're trying to run PPC campaigns. We're trying to run social media campaigns. All that is to build a following for your product, and it costs money and it takes time. So here you have an audience already that wrote checks for you, and they feel for you. So, and they don't cost anything, right? So it's a no-brainer. And I'm not surprised that generating $39,000 out of 5% of the people, it's because it's the old 80-20 rule, right? So it's the same situation. So it makes total sense. Well, I mean, this is a very, to me, when I listen to you and then you walk through the steps and why, and then your fallback on why Amazon data will be important is, I mean, that's how it will replicate or not. So ahead of time. So you just have to now figure out the logistics of the Amazon operation and then simply leverage your audience in the process. So it's a great conversation, man. So this is a great discovery on your part. So my hat is off to you, and you're helping a lot of people. And what I love about this whole thing is you're not producing anything. There's no lead time. There's no nothing. There's no bringing inventory without knowing what's going to happen. So it's a big deal. So everybody listening, definitely, I would say, give it a shot. There is no harm. You just have to, whatever that you have to do anyway. So there's nothing here other than just putting up a campaign page, doing your research, building your audience, your email, your assets that you're going to build. You're going to have to do anyway. So you may as well do it without also having to do anything for building an inventory, at least your initial batch. So it's a great conversation, Vance. Congratulations. So I'm sure people are very happy with this program. And you teach this, right? You have a Playground Theory is your company that you teach.
Yeah, Playground Theory is the company for this accelerator program that I have, which is called the Launch Accelerator Blueprint. So this blueprint is kind of the way that we use to execute the campaigns. And this is our system that we developed through our own launches. So we've launched a few campaigns of our own, and we've, through the process, and often this is how things happen, is just we didn't really plan on getting into this, but a lot of people started asking for help and like, how do you do this? And so that's how we ended up kind of putting together our knowledge to launch campaigns. So we we've raised about $7 million collectively from all of the campaigns that we were involved in launching. And this is not e-commerce results. This is just pre-order launches. So this is just essentially the results that we get from accumulating all of the pre-orders of all the campaigns that have been launched through our system. So
great. This is great. I'm sure people will take advantage of it. So let's now, we got to know all about your program. Let's now get to know you a little bit. So tell us, who is Vance Lee? And what I'm interested in the most is your early life experiences. So I know, at the beginning you were a 9-to-5 guy, and then you went into video, but well before that, what was it like growing up, and what were your interests that obviously they led them to where you are today?
great question. When I was young, I think I wasn't. I mean, when you're a kid, you're not thinking about businesses and this type of thing. I wasn't even thinking of travel when I was a kid. But I think when I was young, I was really into sports. I was really into like physical fitness, like these types of things that were just kind of fun for me as a child. And I mean, I got a lot of inspiration from my father, who was an entrepreneur at the time. He owned a restaurant, and he always kind of like tried different things. So growing up, I always saw. I didn't call it entrepreneurship, and I don't think anybody back then used that like buzzword, but it was just somebody that was doing something to do their best to create something that would make a better life for themselves, right? And so I grew up seeing my dad do that, and a lot of my childhood actually was like working and doing stuff for my dad, delivering the flyers and working at the restaurant, sometimes answering phone calls. And so I kind of got an early start in responsibility, I think, which shaped my life a lot. But outside of that, just really into fitness and those types of things that really kind of kept me going in terms of just keeping my body going.
Let me understand your environment first, growing up. So where did you grow up?
I grew up in a city outside of Toronto, like a smaller city outside of Toronto in Canada. So Toronto, Canada, a city that's about 45 minutes away from Toronto.
And a small town?
Smallish. I mean, compared to Toronto, small.
Yeah. Okay. So, and your father was he always had a restaurant, or did he decide to open a restaurant? What was that?
I was at a young age, maybe it was right before I was born that he opened this restaurant. I think he was trying other things. He was just experimenting with things. And by the time I was born, the restaurant was there. I don't remember it at that age, but I grew up with the fact that he had this restaurant that he was working on a regular basis.
So you're coming into an environment where you know that you eat what you kill, right? That's the entrepreneur's life, right? So you eat what you kill, and in order to eat, and in order to keep it going, you have to come up with something new, and that's what you are seeing growing up. Your dad trying different things all the time, right?
Pretty much, yeah. And then eventually he started learning massage therapy and acupuncture and these types of interesting kind of therapy modalities. And then he moved towards that. So at a certain point in my life, I was in grade 8, I believe. Grade 7, grade 8, he was already learning this, and then he kind of moved into like the health and healing path. And I just he's still on this path now. But that's what I saw growing up as a kid. It's just this man trying his best, doing different things and exploring different ways that he could do well for himself.
So this is very interesting to me. You see, what's happening is you grew up seeing people taking risks, trying new things, and now you are involved in supporting people trying new things, right? It's like, things coming full circle. You have almost become all these people coming to your playground theory program, or doing anything where you are involved. Your whole involvement is nurturing these people trying new things. You become their surrogate dad.
I never thought about it this way, but that's a very well put way to describe it.
Well, I mean, I don't see any other way to see it. But when I hear this, it's always the same, because people just go back to whatever was in their nurturing environment in the first place. So, and then you go to, so you grow up, and the other thing is, of course, in order to sustain this, you have that fitness, mental and physical fitness, and you are active. And and then tell us more, once you are at an age where, you've got your education and everything, how did you transition into the working life, so to speak?
Well, I dabbled with entrepreneurship in a different way earlier on, and I never thought about it as that. But when I was in university, I started getting involved in student associations, student clubs, and all these types of things that were kind of interesting when it came to creating things. So I got involved in a student group where I led this group to create lots of events and a charity fashion show and parties and things like this. So it was kind of like an opportunity for me to learn about how to deal with people and leadership and organization and strategy and all these types of things. And that was my first kind of entryway into working with projects. And my first entrepreneurship project was actually a education platform. Back then it wasn't very easy and it wasn't very supported. Nowadays, like, entrepreneurship is like, yeah, go for it, everyone. And there's resources on YouTube and Instagram and TikTok, and everybody's talking about it. But back then it wasn't like a very prevalent thing. And I had a roommate back at the time, a good friend of mine, and we started this company called Study Monkey. And this company was it's a notes platform where you could buy and sell notes. So if you're a good student, you can upload your notes there, and then people that need notes, they can go download them and pay for a certain amount. And we would take a cut as the website. So we actually did this for about a year before we realized that we both weren't passionate about it, and it just became a good experience to to kind of go through this this attempt to build something and to take it from nothing to to potentially something. And it didn't really make it there in the end. We got to a couple of universities, but it wasn't it wasn't that hit. It wasn't one of those kind of like .com stories of a successful platform, but it was a good learning experience. And then after that, I kind of took a little bit of a break and went back to like a regular job, kind of to regroup and decide what I wanted to do. And that's after what kind of led to the the video production agency that you mentioned, and eventually the Amazon business.
Yeah. So what I want to know also is, you are doing this 9-to-5 job that's become, if you like, your mindset. Okay, this is what I'm going to do. You've had a startup experience and didn't really go as hopeful as you were at the beginning, and now you're doing this job. Of course, it's the financial security somehow, that it gives you, the video production, and then you think, well, I don't want to be in just one place. I want to travel. And then how do you go from full-time job with financial security to wanting to travel the world while selling on Amazon?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I think what motivated this was my first trip to Thailand. And I got here, and it was my first trip across this side of the world by myself. I'd come here, I'd come to Asia before with my family when I was younger, but it was my first trip that I took by myself. And I just had a really great experience of this idea of exploring and traveling. And there's something about it that just lit a fire within me. So I asked myself the question, well, what do I need to do this all the time? Or how can I make this my life? And when I went back to Toronto, I started researching and started thinking, okay, what can I do? What's possible to create this opportunity? And I had a friend that was selling on Amazon at the time, who he was just starting out as well, but he told me about Amazon. I mean, not like that wasn't the first time I found out about Amazon, but like in terms of Amazon as a business. And I said, if this is going to be the opportunity that I have, I mean, it's the first thing that came across my table at the time. So I said, you know what, let's just go for it. I mean, there's not much of I'm not in a situation where if I failed, I would be homeless. I could at any point get a job if I wanted to. Like this, the downside was not very high, but the upside had a lot of opportunity, which is for me to be able to actually create the life that I wanted. So I think in that situation, for me, it wasn't a very difficult decision to say, hey, let's go for the upside, and that's just what happened.
Yeah. Well, clearly it was the right decision. And then they led you to a place that you are most familiar with, and that's helping people with their ideas and, showing them the way. So it's a great conversation. And anybody who's got a job out there that relies on that paycheck, that feels it's comfortable, well, there is a better world and a better life. And as you just, outlined.
Yeah,
This,
I mean, I think this life is not for everyone. It's just, I think it's important for people, in my opinion, to ask, what is that better life for me? Because it might not be to travel the world. It might not be to work online. Like these things might not be important to some people. But I think the people that need to ask this question, at least they should ask it once to understand, am I lying to myself? Am I just accepting this because this is safe or comfortable? If they don't ever ask the question, then I think it's very difficult for them to know what the reality is. And the reality could be that, hey, I am very happy with this 9 to 5 job. If that's the case, then continue with what you're doing. But I think for a lot of people, that is not what they want. And deep down in their heart, they might feel the safety and the money's there, but deep down in their heart, they know that that's not what they desire. And if they were to be honest with themselves, they might say, hey, there might be something else that I want. And that's really hard to admit, because once you admit that, then you might have to take responsibility for taking actions to do the thing that you want, which is, I think, a challenge for a lot of people. So, but I think for a lot of people, they should ask. And it might be that they don't want anything like this. They might not even want to start a business. But I think for a lot of people that are listening and, they have this inkling, like this feeling inside that there might be something that they want that's different from their current situation. There's something better out there, and I think it's about asking the questions to understand what that is for each individual. It's going to be different.
Yeah, there is the principle I've always lived my life by, and that this is a long time ago. Growing up, I don't remember exactly what was the incident, but I developed this idea that I never want to ask myself one day, I wonder what would have happened if I had done this. And I thought, I don't want to live in a way where one day I'm going to have things that I thought about doing, but I never did. And I wonder what would have happened if I had acted on those things. So this is not to say that jump into things without knowing, but think about it. You can live a whole life with something you want to do, and you never do it. And then there comes a point that you can't do those things anymore. And then it's there. And I thought, I never want to be in that position ever. So I did things that whatever I thought not little things, but big things in life, changing lifestyle, changing job, changing whatever, company, relationships, you name it. Relationships that I wondered, would it work? Would it not work? Companies, anything. So I don't want a life where when somebody one day says, what if I had done this? And that was, I think, the thing that drove me. And in this, your story, I hear something similar, where you wanted something and you didn't want it to just be stuck with what you had. You just wanted to take action on it. It's a great story, Vance.
Yeah, and I think we all have a version of this, which is maybe it's in our business. Hey, we want to take that next step or that next level to that other opportunity. Maybe it's about forming a new partnership with someone. Like, there's so many things that this is applicable to. It's not just about like, hey, let's quit my job and start this business, but it could be a lot of things that it might be like small incremental things that are just uncomfortable. We're not exactly sure, this is the right thing for us, but we don't necessarily want to kind of move out of that to challenge what's kind of working. And I think what you said was a great way to describe it, which is like, do you want to really wonder at some point later in your life, what if, what if?
Yeah.
That's I think that's a scary enough question already. So, it's either you live with the pain of, thinking what if, or you just go for it and just see what happens when you gave it a shot, and whatever happened.
Yeah. You know what they say, you don't know if you're gonna fail or succeed in whatever you want to do, but the failure is guaranteed if you never try. So tell us, how can people reach you? Share your contact information with us.
Sure. You can definitely reach me at my website, livemyplayground.com. So LIVEMY playground.com. And if you're interested in this crowdfunding idea or pre-orders, and this is kind of piqued your interest in some way, I have some free resources that you can definitely download as a walkthrough of the crowdfunding process, how it works, 100% free. You just have to go to livemyplayground.com /legends, and that's going to be where you can find access to the resources and just download them, and you can get in touch with me there if you wanted to find my contact.
Great, very kind of you. So give us the URL again, liveplayground.com /legends.
So live my playground, so LIVEMY playground, PLAYGROUND.com. And if we can post the link, that'd be awesome. But otherwise, you can find my find that and /legends, and that's where you're going to get the free walkthrough resources, which essentially takes you from a lot more detail of what we talked about today and how to execute and each of those components to be effective at a pre-order launch. So hopefully that's going to be a unique way that you can consider thinking outside the box to either start your business or scale your business, because there's to be competitive nowadays, thinking outside of the box is really, really beneficial rather than just trying to do what everybody else is already doing.
Yeah, great. So we will post the URL and your contact information with your episode, so I'm sure people will take advantage of it. Thank you, Vance. Thank you for being here. Great conversation, and I'm grateful for your participation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Before I wrap up, I want to remind everyone to visit www.cellcore.co/legends and mention Amazon Legends to get a free comprehensive audit and a $500 statement credit. It's time to conquer Walmart with Cellcore by your side. Also, don't forget to get your winning product detail page from mindfulgoods.co and get up to 600% boost in your sales. You will get $100 off the service. Visit www.mindfulgoods.co/legends and enter the code Amazon Legends to enjoy your $100 off. And this brings us to the end of another episode, and I'll see you in the next one.
If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review the episode, and share it with someone you think would benefit from it too.